So, you want to not die broke? In most of the world, you're told that rigid budgeting and hustling harder are the primary paths to financial freedom. Yet the most common outcome is joining the 37% of adults who cannot cover a basic $400 emergency. On the bright side, you'll at least be able to maintain your social media presence that masks your underlying debt. If you haven't guessed by the title, today we are going to explore the actual mechanism of escaping financial stagnation. We are looking at advice that gets ignored because it doesn't fit in a 60-second TikTok or even a 10-minute video. And even when it doesn't get ignored, it's usually so vague and philosophical that even if it works, the only person that could follow it is probably Socrates. But I will treat you like the reasonably intelligent monkey that you are. So, what can you actually do to stop the cycle of being broke? That's not just the same 6 life hacks from a Facebook post, copied and pasted from a WikiHow article. The first thing you need to do is understand why you are always broke, despite having a regular paycheck. Here's a common misconception. If you just had more willpower, you'd stop buying stuff you don't need. But that's like saying if you just tried harder, you could hold your breath underwater forever. Imagine this. You've had a terrible day. Your boss implied your work is quaint. Your lunch spilled on your only clean shirt. So you go into a random store on the way home and you spot those gummy worms you haven't eaten since middle school. For 98 cents, you can feel like a kid again. Not broke, not stressed, just sticky-fingered and happy for 6 minutes. So you buy them, and for a second, it works. That's not weakness. That's your nervous system deploying a relief valve. A 2021 study published in the Journal of Consumer Research tracked people's real-time emotional states before, during, and after unplanned purchases. What they found wasn't greed, it was distress. Participants weren't buying luxury items. They were buying $3 candles, phone cases with cartoon cats, and snack-sized bags of chips. Tiny treats that delivered a microdose of control in a life that felt out of control. The problem isn't the purchase, it's the aftermath. Because 5 minutes later, the high fades, and now you've got $7 less and a fresh layer of shame. You tell yourself, I'm so stupid, which makes you feel worse, which makes you crave another hit, this time maybe a $12 latte. And before you know it, you spent $40 on emotional band-aids that leave you bleeding faster. Budgeting apps can't fix this. Not because they're bad tools, but because they treat impulse buys like math errors, not emotional signals. They show you where the money went, but not why your brain needed to send it there. So why does shopping feel like self-care, even when it's self-sabotage? Why budgets fail, and what actually works instead? Here's a common misconception. If you just stuck to your budget, you'd finally get ahead. But that's like saying if you just wore the right running shoes, you'd win the Olympics. The flaw isn't your execution, it's the blueprint. Remember that 2019 study by the National Foundation for Credit Counseling? They tracked New Year's financial resolutions and found that 80% of people abandoned their budgets by February. Not because they were lazy, not because they didn't care, but because most budgets are built like prison cells, rigid, punitive, and designed to fail the moment real life happens. A perfect budget says, you can spend $42 on groceries. Real life says, the toilet overflowed, your cousin's birthday is tomorrow, and your favorite yogurt is on sale 2 for 1. Do you really want to miss out again? The moment that tension hits, your brain doesn't negotiate. It revolts. It says, screw it, I'll start again next month. And the cycle repeats. This isn't moral failure. It's behavioral physics. Willpower isn't a character trait. It's a finite resource, like phone battery. Every no you say drains it. Every trade-off weighs on it. And rigid budgets demand constant micro-denials. Can I get this coffee? Should I skip the movie? Is this $3 toothpaste really necessary? By 3 p.m., your decision-making is running on fumes, and your brain grabs the nearest dopamine hit just to feel like a human again. Worse, budgets often pit your ideal self the organized, spreadsheet-loving planner, against your real self, the tired, emotionally complex person who just wants to sit on the couch with a burrito and not think about compound interest. When those selves clash, the ideal self always loses, because ideals don't pay bills. Real people do. So why do our best intentions crumble under the weight of daily decisions? Why social comparison keeps you broke, even if you don't admit it. Imagine you're at a dinner party where everyone's wearing invisible price tags on their outfits, phones, and even their laughter. You didn't ask for this auction, but you're bidding anyway. Here's the thing. You don't need to care about status to be manipulated by it. In fact, the most dangerous comparisons happen when you swear you're immune. Because while you're telling yourself, I don't care what people think, your brain is quietly scanning the room, calculating whether your shoes are acceptable or your phone case looks desperate. A 2022 study from the University of Pennsylvania tracked Instagram users who followed luxury lifestyle accounts. Think yachts, designer halls, quiet luxury brunches. Within 3 months, those users reported 27% higher credit card debt and were twice as likely to take out short-term loans. Not because they suddenly wanted a Rolex, but because their internal benchmark for normal shifted. What used to feel like excess now felt like baseline, and falling below that baseline, that felt like social death. This isn't vanity, it's primal wiring. For most of human history, being excluded from the group meant literal death. So your brain treats social misalignment like showing up to a group trip with a beat-up suitcase while everyone else has matching away sets, as a survival threat. And when your nervous system senses threat, it overrides logic. You buy the 85 neutral tote not because you love it, but because it whispers, I belong. The cruelty, the people you're comparing yourself to are often just as broke. That influencer posing with a Birkin, leasing it for a photo shoot, your co-worker with the perfect Airbnb feed, maxed out on 3 credit cards. But you don't see the receipts, you see the performance, and your brain treats the performance as truth. So why does someone else's lifestyle feel like a personal threat to your self-worth? Why you keep delaying saving, and how to fix it today. When was the last time you looked at your savings account and thought, I'll start contributing seriously next month? Here's the uncomfortable twist. Your brain isn't procrastinating because you're lazy. It's because it literally doesn't recognize future you as you. In a landmark 2018 Stanford neuroimaging study, researchers asked participants to think about their current selves and their future selves while inside an fMRI machine. The results were startling. When people thought about themselves 1 year from now, their brain activity looked nearly identical to when they thought about a complete stranger. The medial prefrontal cortex, the region tied to self-referential thinking, lit up for present you and went dark for future you. That's not poetic metaphor, that's neurological fact. To your brain, saving money isn't doing something for yourself. It's donating to a random person you've never met, who happens to share your name. And let's be real, if someone on the street asked you to hand over $200 for your future self, you'd probably walk faster. This is called temporal discounting, the psychological phenomenon where your brain assigns rapidly declining value to rewards the farther they are in the future. $100 today feels urgent. $150 feels urgent. $150 in 6 months might as well be monopoly money. And because future you feels like a fictional character, you assume they'll magically handle things, have more willpower, earn more, or just figure it out. But here's the cruel irony. The longer you wait, the more future you becomes the least equipped to fix it. Because while you're waiting for more money, inflation is eroding purchasing power, emergencies are compounding, and the math of compound interest is quietly slipping away. So why does your brain treat your future self like a stranger you don't care about? Why money shame keeps you stuck in silence? When was the last time you lied about how much something cost? Not because you were hiding it from someone else, but because you couldn't bear to admit it to yourself. Here's the thing. Money shame doesn't sound like shame. It sounds like silence. It's the reason you change the subject when rent comes up at dinner. It's why you scroll past your bank notification without opening it. It's why you'd rather say, "I'm busy," than "I can't afford it." A 2020 survey by the National Endowment for Financial Education found that 61% of adults feel anxious or guilty discussing money with even their closest friends or partners. Not because they're hiding something illegal, but because admitting financial struggle feels like admitting personal failure. In a culture that equates net worth with self-worth, saying "I'm broke" isn't just a statement of fact, it's an invitation for judgment. And so, you stay quiet. But silence isn't neutral, it's active sabotage. When you don't talk about money, you miss out on shared solutions. "Oh, I use this app to track groceries," or "My landlord lets me pay half up front if I ask." You assume you're the only one struggling, which deepens the isolation, which makes the shame worse, which keeps you silent. It's a closed loop with no exit. Worse, secrecy blocks access to community wisdom. Your broke aunt might know 10 ways to stretch a grocery budget. Your coworker might have negotiated a payment plan you never knew existed. But if no one talks, no one learns. And the only voices you hear are the curated ones online, saying things like, "Just invest early," or "Stop buying lattes," which only make you feel dumber for not already doing it. So why does admitting you're broke feel like admitting you're a failure? Why you're addicted to get-rich-quick dreams and it's keeping you poor? When was the last time you checked a crypto price chart or scrolled through a side hustle turned empire TikTok? Not because you had a plan, but because you needed to believe escape was still possible. Here's the uncomfortable truth. Get-rich-quick fantasies aren't signs of greed, they're symptoms of exhaustion. When your real financial options feel slow, boring, or out of reach, your brain latches onto improbable windfalls like a life raft. Not because you actually think you'll win the lottery, but because the idea of it gives you temporary relief from the weight of daily reality. Take the 2021 Powerball spike during peak pandemic unemployment. Ticket sales surged by 32%, not because people suddenly had extra cash, but because hope became a currency of its own. When every bill feels like a verdict on your worth, a $2 ticket that says you could be rich by Friday isn't gambling. It's psychological triage. This is the availability heuristic in action. Your brain mistakes vivid for likely. You don't see the millions who lost money in meme stocks. You see the one guy who posted his Lamborghini receipt. You don't hear about the 99.8% of dropshippers who quit in 3 months. You hear the guy who made $50K in a weekend and probably didn't. These stories are rare, but they're sticky, and your brain treats them as blueprints instead of noise. The real damage isn't the 20 you spent on scratch-offs. It's the mental energy diverted from boring effective actions, like calling your bank to lower a fee or setting up a $5 auto transfer, because part of you is still waiting for the magic bullet. So why does fantasy feel more motivating than real, incremental progress? Why money decisions drain you, and how to reduce the mental load. When was the last time you stood in the grocery aisle for 5 minutes just trying to decide between the $2.99 store brand cereal and the $4.49 name brand one, knowing either choice would wreck your budget in a different way? Here's the brutal part. Being broke isn't just about lacking money. It's about lacking cognitive space. Every financial decision, no matter how small, forces you into a high-stakes calculation your brain wasn't built to handle continuously. In a now classic 2013 field study, economists Sendhil Mullainathan and Eldar Shafir tracked Indian sugarcane farmers before and after harvest. Before harvest, when cash was tight, the farmers scored 13 points lower on IQ tests and showed impaired planning, memory, and impulse control. After harvest, same people, same brains, those deficits vanished. The only variable, financial pressure, that's not about intelligence. That's about bandwidth. Poverty doesn't make you dumb, it makes you distracted. When your brain is constantly solving for, "How do I make this 27 last 3 days?" It has less capacity to notice a better bank account, remember to cancel a subscription, or even plan meals efficiently. You're not lazy, you're overloaded. This is why just make better choices is such cruel advice. It assumes you have spare mental RAM. But when every dollar has 3 jobs, every decision carries emotional weight, and the consequences of a mistake feel catastrophic. Your brain goes into survival mode. And survival mode doesn't optimize for the future, it stabilizes the present. Even if that means paying 299% APR on a payday loan because it's the only path that doesn't involve eviction tomorrow. So why does being broke feel like running a mental marathon every single day? Why your brain reacts to money like it's starving. Common misconception: if you just calm down, you could make smarter money choices. But that's like telling someone with a sprained ankle to just walk straight. The problem isn't your attitude, it's your biology. Remember the invisible audience? That constant low-grade panic you feel when your bank balance dips below $100? It's not paranoia, it's your amygdala, the brain's smoke detector, screaming that you're in danger. In a 2016 fMRI study at the University of California, researchers scanned people's brains while showing them simulated bank statements. When participants saw balances that signaled potential insolvency, their amygdala lit up like a fire alarm, not metaphorically, literally. Blood flow surged, neural firing spiked. Their brains responded to financial threat the same way they would to a growling dog or a swerving car. This is ancient wiring. For most of human history, running out of resources meant death. So your nervous system doesn't distinguish between "I'm temporarily low on cash" and "I might starve this winter." It defaults to emergency protocol, fight, flight, or freeze. And in that state, logic shuts down. You don't compare interest rates, you grab the fastest relief. You don't plan, you react. That's why just budget better fails during a crisis. You're not operating from your prefrontal cortex, the planner. You're running on your reptilian brain, the survivor. And the survivor doesn't care about your 5-year net worth. It cares about not getting kicked out tomorrow. So if your brain is wired to panic about money, how can you possibly override it? How your childhood money beliefs control your wallet today. Common misconception: now that you're an adult, you're in full control of your financial choices. But that's like saying you can redesign your native language just by deciding to. The truth is, your money beliefs were installed long before you knew what a 401k was, and they've been running in the background ever since. Enter the work of clinical psychologist Dr. Brad Klontz, who spent years analyzing what he calls money scripts, unconscious, emotionally charged beliefs about money formed in childhood. In one study, he identified 4 dominant types: money avoidance, money is evil, money worship, more money will solve everything, money status, my worth equals my wallet, and money vigilance, I must save every penny or disaster will strike. Here's the kicker. You probably inherited yours from overhearing 3 offhand remarks before age 10. Maybe it was your dad sighing, "We can't afford that," every time you asked for new shoes, teaching you that desire equals shame. Maybe it was your mom hiding grocery receipts, implying money is a secret. Or maybe your family treated wealth like a moral failing. Rich people are greedy, so now earning more triggers guilt instead of pride. These scripts aren't logical, they're emotional operating systems, and they run silently, even when your adult self knows better. That's why you might intellectually support investing, but flinch when it's time to actually transfer funds, or why you preach frugality, but splurge when stressed, as if proving you deserve relief. The real danger? These scripts create identity traps. If you believe, "I'm bad with money," every mistake confirms it. If you think money corrupts, success feels like betrayal, and no budget app can override a belief that's been whispering in your ear since you were 7. So if your money beliefs were installed before you could question them, how do you reprogram them? Why willpower fails with money, and what to use instead. Common misconception: if you just had more discipline, you'd stop overspending. but that's like saying if you just had stronger legs, you could outrun gravity. The problem isn't your effort, it's the assumption that willpower is infinite. Remember the radish and cookie experiment? In the classic 1990 study by Roy Baumeister, participants were asked to resist freshly baked cookies and eat radishes instead. Later, when given a difficult puzzle, the radish group gave up in half the time as the cookie group. Their willpower was used up, not lost, not weak, consumed. Now apply that to your Tuesday night. You spend all day saying no, no to the group lunch, no to the overpriced parking spot, no to the why not. Amazon notification. By 8 p.m., your decision-making battery is at 3%. And then your friend texts, "Quick drinks, my treat?" You say yes, not because you want the drink, but because your brain has nothing left to say no with. Willpower isn't a character trait, it's a biological resource, like glycogen in your muscles. It depletes with use, and financial stress is its ultimate drain. Every trade-off, should I get generic or name brand? Can I afford this bus fare or walk? Is a tiny willpower tax. Do it 50 times a day, and by dinner, your brain defaults to relief, not reason. This is why "I'll start tomorrow" is such a seductive lie. Tomorrow feels like a blank slate, until it isn't, because tomorrow you'll face the same decisions, the same stress, and the same depleted reserves. Discipline doesn't scale, systems do. So if willpower is unreliable, what systems can carry you when motivation fails? How dopamine keeps you broke. The neuroscience of impulse buys. Your brain is a casino where every swipe, click, and buy now button pulls a slot machine lever. And the house always wins. Remember the marshmallow test? In the 1960s, Walter Mischel offered kids one marshmallow now, or two if they waited 15 minutes. Decades later, follow-up studies showed those who waited didn't just have better self-control, they earned more, saved more, and had fewer financial troubles as adults. But here's what they didn't tell you in psychology class. It wasn't willpower that made the difference. It was dopamine regulation. Your reward system doesn't just respond to pleasure, it predicts it. When you see a flash sale notification, your brain doesn't wait for the purchase to feel good. It anticipates the hit and releases dopamine in advance. That's why scrolling through online deals feels so compelling, even when you have no intention to buy. The brain is already tasting the relief. Modern spending is engineered to exploit this. Buy now, pay later. That's not financing, it's dopamine on credit. One-click ordering, that's removing friction so your reward circuit fires before your prefrontal cortex can object. And unpredictable rewards, like mystery boxes, limited drops, or surprise discounts, activate the same neural pathways as gambling. You're not shopping. You're chasing a neurochemical jackpot. Worse, each hit recalibrates your baseline. The first $5 coffee feels indulgent, the 10th feels neutral, and soon you need bigger, faster hits just to feel the same lift, while your savings account stays flat, silent, and unrewarding. So if your brain is wired to chase quick hits, how do you retrain it for long-term rewards? Why you spend like your friends, even when you can't afford to? Common misconception. You choose your spending based on your own values and income, but that's like saying you choose your accent purely through willpower. In reality, your financial behavior is shaped by the unspoken rules of the people around you, even when you swear you're not influenced. Remember Ash's conformity experiments from the 1950s? Participants were shown a line and asked to match it with one of three others. Alone, they got it right 99% of the time. But when placed in a room with actors who all gave the wrong answer, 75% of participants conformed at least once, choosing the clearly incorrect line just to go along with the group. Now imagine that line is a 75 dinner check. Your friend group assumes we all split evenly, even though half of you just want water and a side salad. Saying, "Actually, I can't afford this," feels like breaking the social contract, so you pay. Not because you want to, but because the cost of exclusion feels higher than the cost of the meal. This isn't weakness. It's evolutionary logic. For most of human history, getting kicked out of the tribe meant death. So your brain treats financial non-conformity, like refusing a group trip, skipping birthdays, or saying, "I don't do DoorDash," as a threat to belonging. And when belonging is at stake, your prefrontal cortex shuts up, and your social survival instincts take over. The irony? Nobody in the group actually wants to be spending this much, but because no one speaks up, the norm hardens. Everyone assumes they're the only ones struggling, so they stay silent, spend more, and deepen the cycle. So if your tribe sets your spending norms, how do you opt out without losing connection? Why you keep throwing good money after bad? Sunk cost explained. Common misconception: if you've already spent money on something, you need to keep investing to make it worth it. But that's like refusing to leave a burning building because you already paid for the tour. Enter the Concorde fallacy. In the 1960s, the British and French governments poured billions into a supersonic passenger jet that was already economically doomed. Even when engineers and economists warned it would never turn a profit, they kept funding it for decades. Why? Because admitting failure meant admitting they'd wasted colossal sums. So instead of cutting their losses, they doubled down, hoping the next billion would somehow redeem the last. That's not government incompetence. That's human wiring. Your brain hates the feeling of wasted effort so much that it would rather lose more to avoid feeling like you lost anything. This is the sunk cost bias, the irrational belief that past investments of time, money, or emotion should influence future decisions. You keep paying for that unused gym membership because you've already paid for a year. You stick with a failing side hustle because you've already bought the domain and spent 80 hours building it. You stay in a dead-end job because you've already invested 5 years here. But here's the secret. Money already spent is gone. It has no say in what's smart now. The only question that matters is, if I hadn't spent a dime on this yet, would I start today? If the answer is no, the right move isn't to make it work. It's to walk away and redirect your energy somewhere with real potential. So if we're wired to honor past spending, how do we break free from financial sunk costs? High being broke changes how you think. The Scarcity Trap. Scarcity is like wearing financial tunnel vision goggles. You can only see what's directly in front of you, and everything else fades to black. Remember the Indian sugarcane farmers from Section 8? The same study that showed their IQ drop during lean months also revealed something even more insidious. Their decision-making didn't just get worse, it got narrower. When cash was tight, they'd take high-interest loans for short-term needs, even though they knew cheaper options existed, if they had time to find them. But they didn't have time, or rather, their mental bandwidth was so consumed by, how do I feed my kids this week? That, what's the best long-term financing option, never made it onto the screen. This is cognitive tunneling. Scarcity doesn't just reduce your resources, it hijacks your attention. Your brain prioritizes the loudest, most urgent problem, the $85 electric bill due tomorrow, and pushes everything else, retirement, insurance, even meal planning, into the background. Not because you don't care, because your operating system is in emergency mode. And here's the cruel loop. The narrower your focus, the more expensive your choices become. You buy small quantities of food at higher per unit cost because you can't afford bulk. You pay late fees because you're juggling 3 due dates in your head. You skip preventive car maintenance, then get hit with a $600 repair. Each rational short-term fix deepens long-term instability. Worse, this tunneling isn't temporary. The longer you live in scarcity, the more your brain rewires to expect it. You stop looking for opportunities because your attention is trained on threats. You stop planning because, what's the point? And slowly the world shrinks to the size of your next bill. So if scarcity narrows your vision, how do you create cognitive space to think ahead? You think you're in control of your money, but you're not. Common misconception: if you track your spending, you're in control of your finances. But that's like saying if you notice the wind, you're steering the sailboat. Most financial choices aren't choices at all. They're defaults you never questioned. Enter the Milgram experiment, but with money. In the original 1961 test, participants administered what they believed were painful electric shocks to strangers, simply because an authority figure said, "Please continue." Compliance wasn't cruelty, it was automation. People followed the script because it required less mental effort than pushing back. Now swap the lab coat for a subscription confirmation email. Your premium plan renews automatically next month. You don't choose to spend $14.99 on that meditation app you used once. You just didn't cancel it. And that's not your fault, it's by design. Companies know that when action requires effort, inaction wins. So they make signing up easy and leaving hard. This is the illusion of control. You believe you're managing your money because you could cancel, downgrade, or switch someday. But someday never comes because every day your brain prioritizes urgent tasks over hypothetical savings. Meanwhile, those 9, 90, 12,000, 50, and $4.99 charges pile up into a silent drain. $200 a month you didn't plan for, didn't enjoy, and barely noticed. Worse, auto-renewals create a false sense of intentionality. You think, "I'm paying for this, so I must value it." Even when you haven't logged in since 2022, your spending isn't reflecting your priorities, it's reflecting your inertia. So if your sense of control is an illusion, how do you design real agency into your finances? Why hustle culture is keeping you broke, the myth of the self-made. Common misconception: if you just worked harder or launched one more side hustle, you'd finally get ahead. But that's like blaming your car for running out of gas when you've been pouring water into the tank. The problem isn't effort, it's the myth that effort alone builds wealth. Enter the ghost of Horatio Alger. In the late 1800s, his dime novels told stories of bootblacks and newsboys rising to riches through grit and gumption. Those tales were fiction then, and they're fiction now. Yet today they've been reborn as TikTok reels of 22-year-olds flashing screenshots of 50K months while sipping bodega coffee at 5 a.m. The caption, "No days off," as if poverty is just a time management problem. This is the hustle trap, the belief that more work is the antidote to broken systems. But real wealth isn't built on hours, it's built on leverage, ownership, assets that pay you while you sleep. Meanwhile, hustle culture glorifies exhaustion as virtue and confuses income with net worth. You can earn $8 a month and still be broke if your money vanishes the second it arrives, because you never built a system to hold it. Worse, when hustle doesn't produce results, and it rarely does at scale, you blame yourself. "I didn't wake up early enough. I should have posted more reels." But the truth? For most people, grinding harder just means running faster in place, while landlords, shareholders, and credit card companies quietly collect the real gains. So, if the hustle harder story is a myth, what actually builds lasting wealth? Why knowing about money isn't enough to get rich? Common misconception: if you just learned more about finance, watched enough YouTube videos, read enough books, you'd finally get ahead. But that's like thinking reading a cookbook will make you lose weight. Knowledge isn't the bottleneck, action is. Enter the 2014 meta-analysis by Fernandez, Lynch, and Nettemeyer. They reviewed over 200 financial education studies spanning 20 years and found something shocking. Financial literacy programs had almost zero long-term impact on actual behavior. People walked away knowing what a Roth IRA was, but they still didn't open one. They understood compound interest, but they still didn't automate savings. The gap wasn't comprehension. It was implementation. This is the knowledge-action chasm. Your brain can hold two truths at once. I should save more, and I'm buying these concert tickets. And in the moment, emotion, habit, and context always beat information. No amount of spreadsheet knowledge stops you from ordering takeout when you're exhausted, lonely, or overwhelmed. Worse, financial education often makes things worse by creating illusionary confidence. You watch a video on index funds, feel smarter, and assume you're now on track. even though you haven't changed a single transaction in your bank account. You mistake consumption of information for progress. Real change doesn't come from knowing more. It comes from designing systems that make the right choice the easy choice before your brain has a chance to negotiate. So if learning more won't fix your finances, what bridges the gap between knowing and doing? Why you subconsciously reject wealth, identity versus goals. Common misconception. If you just set a clear financial goal, like save 10-0, you'd naturally start acting like someone who achieves it. But that's like putting a professional chef name tag on your apron while still burning toast. Behavior doesn't follow aspiration, it follows identity. Enter the story of a writer interviewed in James Clear's Atomic Habits. She wanted to save money for years but never could until she stopped saying, "I need to save," and started asking, "What would a person who invests do?" That tiny shift changed everything. She opened a brokerage account. She set up auto transfers. She read one finance article a week, not because she had to, but because investors do that. This is self-perception theory in action. We don't infer our identity from big declarations. We infer it from our repeated actions. And if your self-story is, "I'm bad with money," every financial win feels like a fluke, while every slip confirms your true nature. You might earn a bonus and immediately spend it before it disappears, not from recklessness, but from disbelief that you're the kind of person who keeps money. The brain abhors cognitive dissonance. So if your goal, "I want to be wealthy," clashes with your identity, "I'm the chaotic spender," your subconscious will sabotage the goal to restore internal harmony. You'll find reasons to skip the transfer. You'll forget to cancel the subscription. You'll feel weird saving while your friends struggle, because deep down, wealth doesn't feel like you. So if your identity is holding you back, how do you rewrite your financial self-story? How being broke literally hurts your body and brain. When was the last time you lay awake at 3 a.m. with your heart pounding, not because of a nightmare, but because you were mentally running through every bill you couldn't pay? This isn't just stress, it's biology in revolt. Enter the Whitehall Studies, the landmark series of research tracking British civil servants over decades. Scientists expected that higher status executives would have worse heart health due to demanding jobs. Instead, they found the opposite. Lower-ranking employees had 3 times the risk of heart disease, even when controlling for diet, smoking, and exercise. The culprit? Chronic financial precarity. Not the workload, not the hours, the lack of control. This is allostatic load, your body's cumulative wear and tear from repeated stress responses. When money worries become constant, your nervous system never fully switches off. Cortisol floods your bloodstream. Blood pressure stays elevated. Sleep fragments. Inflammation markers climb. Over time, this doesn't just make you tired, it degrades your prefrontal cortex, the very part of your brain you need to plan, prioritize, and resist impulsive decisions. You're not bad with money. You're physiologically impaired by the very condition you're trying to escape. A 2022 study in Nature Human Behavior found that people under financial stress showed reduced gray matter in regions tied to decision-making and emotional regulation, changes that mirrored early cognitive decline. Meanwhile, sleep deprivation from money anxiety impairs glucose metabolism, making you crave high-sugar, high-fat foods just to function. Which costs more? Which worsts stress? Which further damages your body? This isn't a loop, it's a spiral. So if financial stress is poisoning your body, how do you reduce its biochemical grip? How to make saving automatic so you never have to try. Common misconception: saving requires constant discipline and sacrifice. But that's like saying breathing requires remembering to inhale every second. The real fix isn't effort, it's architecture. Enter Richard Thaler's Save More Tomorrow program. In the late 1990s, Thaler, a Nobel-winning behavioral economist, noticed that while 78% of employees said they wanted to save more, almost none actually increased their contributions. So he designed a system that bypassed willpower entirely. Employees could commit in advance to saving a portion of future raises. No money came out of today's paycheck, only tomorrow's higher one. And because the increase was automatic, participation jumped from 20 to 78%. Over time, average savings rates quadrupled. That's not magic. That's choice architecture. Your brain resists losing what it already has. I can't afford to save $100 this month. But it barely notices money it never saw. Sure, I'll save part of my next raise. By designing your finances so the right action happens by default, you stop relying on motivation, which is fickle, and start relying on structure, which is reliable. This works at every level. Set up an auto transfer from checking to savings the day after payday. Use a banking app that rounds up purchases and invests the spare change. Delete saved payment info from shopping sites so buying requires friction. These aren't restrictions, they're guardrails. Because here's the truth, you'll never find money to save. You have to make it disappear before your brain can negotiate it back. But applying this pressure creates a new, stranger problem. What if you automate the wrong thing? How to become someone who saves without feeling fake. Common misconception: you need to feel like a saver before you can start saving. But that's like waiting to feel like a runner before lacing up your shoes. Identity doesn't precede action, it follows it. Enter B.J. Fogg's Tiny Habits Method. In his research at Stanford, Fogg found that people who tried to build big habits, like save $200 a month, failed consistently. But those who started absurdly small, like save consistently, but those who started absurdly small, like save $1 after brushing my teeth, succeeded 92% of the time. Why? Because the act of saving, no matter how tiny, rewired their self-perception. After a few weeks, they didn't think, "I'm forcing myself to save." They thought, "I'm the kind of person who saves." That's behavioral momentum. Small, repeated actions create identity shifts without requiring belief first. You don't need to fake confidence. You just need to perform the behavior once, then again, until your brain updates its internal story to match. This works because the brain hates inconsistency. If you say, "I'm bad with money," but then successfully save $1 every Tuesday, your subconscious has two choices: keep the old story and ignore the evidence, or update the story to fit the new reality. Given enough repetitions, it chooses the latter. And here's the kicker: the celebration matters more than the amount. Fogg instructs people to say yes, or do a little fist pump after completing their tiny habit. That micro jolt of pride wires the action to positive emotion, turning saving from a chore into a quiet act of self-respect. But this new identity creates tension with your old social circle. What then? How to care about your future self, so you save for them. If you saw a photo of yourself at 65, tired, stressed, and still working a job you hate, would you feel empathy or resentment? Here's the trick. Your brain doesn't hate future you. It just doesn't know them. Enter Hal Hershfield's groundbreaking experiment at UCLA. Participants were shown either a normal photo of themselves or a digitally age-progressed version. Wrinkles, grayer hair, softer jawline. Then they were asked how much they'd save for retirement. Those who saw their future selves saved twice as much. Not because they suddenly loved money, because they finally saw the person they were saving for. This is self-continuity in action. When future you feels real, like someone you'd recognize in a crowd, you stop treating savings as a sacrifice and start treating it as a gift. You can hack this right now. Write a letter to your 60-year-old self. Not a financial plan, a human note. "Dear me, I hope you're spending mornings reading on the porch, not stressing over bills. I'm trying to give you that. Hang in there." Or use free apps like Aging Booth or FutureMe.org to visualize or message your older self. Even better, reframe saving as generosity. You're not depriving present you. You're rescuing future you from panic, exhaustion, and impossible choices. And since that future person shares your memories, Your fears and your favorite songs, they're worth protecting. But caring for your future self reveals a new conflict. How do you balance present needs with future dreams? Why budgeting fails and the better system that works. Common misconception: a good budget tracks every dollar you spend. But that's like saying a good diet weighs every crumb on your plate. The real problem isn't tracking, it's framing. Enter Morgan Housel's adaptation of the US Navy logistics model. In wartime, the Navy doesn't micromanage how many bolts each ship uses. Instead, it allocates resources by mission. This carrier gets fuel for Pacific operations. That destroyer gets ammo for coastal patrol. Every dollar has a job, not a cage. This is values-based allocation. Instead of saying you can only spend $200 on eating out, you say, I'm funding my peace of mind account with $300 this month, however that shows up. Maybe it's groceries, maybe it's therapy, maybe it's saying yes to your niece's birthday party without panic. The point isn't restriction, it's intention. Traditional budgets fail because they're rooted in scarcity language. Don't spend. Cut back. You blew it. That activates shame, which triggers rebellion, but allocation flips the script. This money is already yours, it just has a mission. Now spending becomes a conscious vote for your values, not a moral test. And because it's flexible, it survives real life. Sick kid? Shift funds from adventure to care. Unexpected bonus, top off, freedom fund before fun. No guilt, no math-induced panic, just priorities in motion. But this freedom creates a new challenge. How do you protect these allocations from emotional hijacking? How to find or build a money community that lifts you up? When was the last time you wished you had someone to call who wouldn't judge you for being 37 short, but would actually help you figure it out? Here's the secret most people miss. You don't need more money advice. You need better financial company. Enter the tontine, a centuries-old system where groups pooled money, took turns receiving the full pot, and held each other accountable. Immigrant communities still use this today. 12 neighbors each put in $100 a month. One person gets $200 that month, and the rotation continues. But the real magic wasn't the cash, it was the trust. The shared stakes, the silent agreement, we rise together. Modern finance has stripped that away. We're told to mind our business, hide our debt, and compare savings milestones like Olympic scores. But isolation breeds bad decisions. When you're the only one in your circle thinking about compound interest, it's easy to slide back into group norms, like splitting an expensive dinner you can't afford, just to belong. A 2019 study by the Global Financial Literacy Excellence Center found that people in peer-based saving groups were 5 times more likely to stick to financial goals than those going solo. Not because they knew more, but because their behavior was mirrored, normalized, and gently enforced by people who got it. You don't need a fancy mastermind. You just need 1 or 2 people who agree. We're not here to impress each other, we're here to get free. Text a friend. Want to check in every Sunday on our Freedom Fund progress? Join a library-hosted financial workshop. Swap budget templates with a coworker. But aligning with a new tribe forces you to confront old loyalties. What gets left behind? How to cut financial losses without feeling like a failure. Common misconception: quitting a bad financial decision means you failed. But that's like refusing to take your car out of reverse because you already moved backward 5 feet. The real failure isn't stopping. It's keeping your foot on the gas while facing the wrong direction. Enter Amazon's fail fast philosophy. Jeff Bezos built one of the world's most valuable companies, not by avoiding mistakes, but by killing them early. In his 2015 shareholder letter, he wrote, "Failure and invention are inseparable twins. Every dead-end project, a $170 million Fire phone, a grocery delivery experiment that flopped, wasn't mourned. It was celebrated as a necessary step toward clarity. You can do the same with your money. That 29-month meditation app you haven't opened since January? Not a sunk cost, a data point, that side hustle, draining 15 hours a week for 87 in profit? Not a commitment, a test that failed. The trick is to reframe cutting losses as strategic reallocation, not surrender. Ask one question. If I hadn't spent a dime on this yet, would I start today? If the answer is no, then continuing isn't loyalty, it's self-sabotage disguised as perseverance. And don't just stop, redirect. The moment you cancel that subscription, move the 29 into your freedom fund. The second you shut down the failing Etsy shop, sign up for that free Excel course that actually aligns with your skills. Loss only feels like failure when the energy disappears. But when it instantly flows into something better, it feels like strategy. But cutting losses creates temporary instability. How do you stay calm during the transition? How to reset your brain's reward system from spending to saving. Common misconception. If you just stopped chasing dopamine hits, you'd naturally start valuing long-term rewards. But that's like expecting your taste buds to crave kale after a lifetime of sugar. Your brain doesn't swap rewards, it rewires them. And rewiring takes replacement, not removal. Enter a 2020 behavioral finance study where participants were asked to track their net worth weekly instead of their spending. Within 6 weeks, 68% reported feeling more satisfied by growth than by consumption. Not because they suddenly loved spreadsheets, but because they'd created a new feedback loop. Saving triggered the same reward circuit that spending once did. This is neuroplasticity in action. Your brain strengthens the pathways you use. Every time you buy something, you reinforce spending equals relief. But every time you move money into savings and celebrate it, even with a mental, hell yes, you start building. Saving equals joy. Start small. When you hit $100 in your freedom fund, do something symbolic. Light a candle, play your victory song, text a friend, just funded future me's coffee. These micro rewards aren't childish, they're neurological training wheels. They attach positive emotion to behaviors that once felt like deprivation. Also, delay, not deny. Gratification. Want that jacket? Put it on a 72-hour wish list. If you still want it after 3 days, buy it guilt-free. But often you won't. And in those 72 hours, your brain practices tolerance for desire without action. A muscle that grows stronger with use. But as your rewards shift from stuff to stability, you might feel strangely hollow. Like you've traded chaos for calm but lost a source of identity. How to free up mental bandwidth for better money decisions. Common misconception. If you just cleared your schedule, you'd have time to figure out your finances. But the real bottleneck isn't hours, it's headspace. Enter the Navy SEALs, OODA loop. Observe, orient, decide, act. In combat, SEALs don't wing it. They preload routines so that in chaos, their actions are automatic. They don't debate whether to reload. They do it at 7 rounds. Why? Because under stress, the brain can't innovate. It can only execute what's already wired. Your financial life needs the same protocol. Right now, you're making dozens of money decisions a day. Is this worth it? Can I afford this? Should I wait? Each one draining mental RAM. But what if you offloaded those choices before the moment of temptation? Start by pre-committing to simple rules. No purchase over $50 without a 48-hour wait. All paychecks auto-transfer 5 to savings before I see the balance. Groceries are bought on Sundays with a preset list, no extras. These aren't restrictions. They're cognitive relief valves. Every rule you automate reclaims bandwidth for what actually matters. Your relationships, your rest, your long-term strategy. A 2022 University of Chicago study found that participants who replaced daily financial decisions with just 3 preset rules reported 31% less anxiety and made 22% fewer impulsive purchases within 4 weeks. Not because they became smarter, but because they stopped forcing their brains to solve the same problems over and over. But when your mind finally quiets down, you're left with a startling question. What do you actually want your money to do for you? How to replace hustle culture with real wealth principles. Common misconception. Building wealth requires non-stop grinding, side hustles, and sleepless nights. But that's like believing you grow taller by stretching on your tiptoes. Real wealth isn't built on effort. It's built on systems, ownership, and patience. Enter Warren Buffett's 20-slot punch card philosophy. Early in his career, Buffett imagined giving a student a punch card with just 20 slots, each representing a lifetime investment decision. You'd think harder before you punched, he said. You'd make sure each one truly mattered. That's the antithesis of hustle culture. Hustle says do more. Wealth says choose better. Hustle glorifies motion. Wealth rewards stillness, waiting for the right opportunity, then acting decisively. Most people chase income because it's visible. A paycheck, a gig, a side sale. But wealth is invisible. It's equity, automatic dividends, compound interest whispering while you sleep. You can earn 6 figures and be broke. You can earn 40, 0, and be wealthy if your money works while you rest. Start by writing your own wealth commandments, not generic advice, personal rules grounded in evidence, not Instagram captions. For example, I will prioritize ownership over income. I will never trade time. I can't get back for money I don't need. I measure success by freedom, not follower count. These aren't motivational posters. They're behavioral guardrails. Every time you're tempted by a hustle hack, ask, does this align with my wealth identity or just feed my anxiety? But living by these principles means you'll stand out. You'll say no to group trips, skip viral side hustles, and ignore FOMO. And that brings a new kind of tension. So how do you handle the discomfort of being different, especially when your old tribe calls you lazy for not grinding? How to reduce money stress in your body, not just your mind. Common misconception. If you just thought more positively about money, your stress would fade. But that's like trying to cool a fever by imagining ice cubes. Real relief starts not in your thoughts, but in your physiology. Enter a 2019 study from the University of Illinois that tracked low-income participants through a simple intervention, 20 minutes of daily walking. After 6 weeks, not only did cortisol levels drop by 27%, but participants also made 41% fewer impulsive financial decisions. Why? Because physical calm rewires financial reactivity. This is embodied cognition. Your body doesn't just respond to stress, it generates your sense of control. When your breath is shallow, your shoulders are tight, and your sleep is fragmented, your brain interprets that as danger. And in danger, it defaults to survival spending, quick fixes, emotional purchases, avoidance of bills. But when you regulate your nervous system, you restore access to your prefrontal cortex, the part that can compare credit card rates or pause before ordering takeout. You don't need a gym membership. You need rhythm, movement, breath. Start with micro interventions. Box breathing. Inhale 4 seconds. Hold 4. Hold 4. Do this for 2 minutes after checking your bank balance. Grounding walks. No phone. No destination. Just notice 5 things you see, 4 you hear, 3 you feel. Sleep protection. Even if you can't control your income, you can protect your sleep window, because exhausted brains spend like cornered animals. These aren't self-care cliches, they're biological resets, and they're the hidden foundation of every smart financial decision you'll ever make. But as your body calms and your finances stabilize, you'll face a new paradox. Stability feels strange. How to handle the discomfort of being different when your tribe doesn't get it. Common misconception: financial progress means fitting in better. But the truth is, the moment you stop keeping up, you'll feel like the weird one at the table. Enter the story of Dr. Seuss's The Sneetches, not as a children's tale, but as a financial parable. The plain-bellied Sneetches longed to belong, spending every coin on star-adding machines, only to watch the rules change again. Sound familiar? That's the trap of normative spending. You chase inclusion, but the goalposts keep moving. Real freedom starts when you stop trying to look financially normal and start protecting your reality. And yes, that creates friction. Your friends might tease you for skipping out on brunch. Your family might call your budgeting obsessive. Your coworker might assume you're rich now because you stopped complaining about money, even though you're just finally breathing. This isn't rejection, it's recalibration. The key is to reframe boundaries as generosity, not just to yourself, but to others. When you say, "I'd love to join, but I'm sticking to my food budget. Can we do potluck instead?" You're not withdrawing. You're inviting them into a new norm. And sometimes they'll follow, other times they won't. And that's okay. A 2021 study in Social Psychological Bulletin found that people who maintained financial boundaries with peer groups reported higher self-esteem and deeper relationships. Not because everyone agreed, but because authenticity replaced performance. So don't apologize for your system. Explain it like it's obvious. I'm building something I care about. Most people won't ask for details. And the ones who do, they're your future tribe. But this new clarity reveals a deeper question. What are you building your money for? How to build a self-reinforcing wealth system that grows automatically. Common misconception: wealth requires constant vigilance and control. But that's like saying a forest only grows if you pull every weed by hand. Real wealth compounds not through micromanagement, but through intelligent design. Enter Ray Dalio's principles feedback loop. The billionaire investor didn't build Bridgewater Associates by reacting to every market hiccup. He built it by creating systems that learned, adapted, and improved without him. Every mistake became a rule. Every success became a template. And over time, the system ran itself, smarter, faster, and more resilient. You can do the same with your finances. Start by identifying your first compound win, a small action that creates a ripple. Maybe it's automating 25-week into a freedom fund. At first, it's barely noticeable, but after 6 months, that fund hits $600.50. And suddenly, you don't panic when your tire blows. You pay for it and keep saving. That calm builds confidence. That confidence fuels bigger decisions. If I can handle this, maybe I can refinance that loan. This is the flywheel effect. Early momentum reduces friction for the next turn. Each win reinforces your identity. I'm someone who handles money, which makes the next right choice easier, which builds more capital, which creates more options. Soon your system isn't just surviving, it's learning. The key is to design for self-correction, not perfection. Build in monthly check-ins. Did my allocations reflect my values? Where did I overspend? Not out of recklessness, but because a rule was missing. Then update the system, not your self-worth. Because freedom isn't a destination, it's a daily practice. What happens after you stop being broke? The hidden challenges. What if getting your finances under control leaves you feeling strangely empty, like you've climbed the mountain only to find it's made of paperwork? Here's the truth nobody warned you about. Financial stability doesn't automatically bring meaning. In fact, it often creates a vacuum. Enter the case files of the National Endowment for Financial Education, which track dozens of sudden wealth recipients, lottery winners, lawsuit settlements, inheritance recipients. A shocking number went broke again within 5 years, not because they blew it on yachts or drugs, but because they had no purpose for their money. They'd spent decades fighting scarcity. Once it lifted, they had no identity, no mission, no reason to keep growing. So they drifted, spent aimlessly, gave too much, felt guilty for having it, and slowly the money vanished, not from greed, but from vacuum. This isn't just about windfalls. It happens to anyone who finally gets control. You pay off credit cards. You build a real emergency fund. You stop living paycheck to paycheck. And then, what? Your O's enemy, scarcity, was also your compass. It told you what to fight, what to fear, what to prioritize. Without it, you're adrift. You might even miss the chaos, not the stress, but the clarity it provided. When you're broke, every decision is urgent. When you're stable, nothing feels urgent. And in that stillness, you're forced to ask the harder questions. What do I actually want? Who am I when I'm not just surviving? This is hedonic adaptation. Your brain returns to baseline happiness, no matter your circumstances. The relief of stability fades. And if you haven't built something to stability, purpose, connection, contribution, that void will pull you back toward old habits, just to feel something again. So what do you fill that void with? So wealth becomes a tool, not just a trophy. How to build finances that get stronger through chaos. Common misconception: financial security means avoiding chaos. But that's like building a boat you never take out of the garage. Real resilience isn't about calm waters. It's about designing a hull that gets stronger with every storm. Enter Nassim Taleb's concept of anti-fragility. Most systems are fragile. They break under stress. Or robust. They resist it. But anti-fragile systems actually improve when exposed to volatility. Your immune system is anti-fragile. It gets stronger after fighting a virus. Your muscles are anti-fragile. They grow from micro tears caused by lifting. Your finances can be too if you stop trying to protect them and start training them. Start with controlled stress tests. Deposit $20 into a chaos fund and don't touch it for a month. When a small surprise hits, a flat tire, a $15.15, you use that fund instead of panicking. Each time you absorb a shock without derailing, your system learns, we can handle this. Next, build optionality. Not just one side gig, but 3 micro income streams that require different skills. Not just one emergency fund, but tiered buffers. $500 for minor hiccups. 2, 0 for job gaps. 3 months of essentials for true black swans. The more ways you can respond to surprise, the less any single event threatens your survival. And finally, reframe volatility as data, not disaster. When your rent jumps, don't just panic. Ask, what does this tell me about my location risk, my income stability, my negotiation habits? Chaos isn't your enemy. It's your most honest teacher. But this strength reveals a deeper truth. Money alone won't give your life meaning. How to use money to build a life that matters, not just a bank account. Common misconception: financial freedom means having a big number in your account. But that's like thinking a full gas tank means you've arrived at your destination. Money isn't the point, it's the vehicle. Enter the parable of the rich fool from Luke 12. The ground of a certain rich man yielded an abundant harvest. He thought to himself, "What shall I do? I have no place to store my crops." Then he said, "This is what I'll do. I'll take life easy, eat, drink, and be merry." But God said to him, "You fool, this very night your life will be demanded from you." This isn't a religious warning, it's a psychological one. The man wasn't punished for being rich. He was foolish for thinking accumulation was the finish line. He mistook having for living. Real wealth isn't measured in digits. It's measured in autonomy, connection, and alignment. Autonomy. Can you say no to work that drains you? Connection. Can you be fully present with people you love without checking your bank balance in your head? Alignment. Does your spending reflect what you claim to care about? Start by auditing your last 3 months of spending, not for waste but for values. Did your money fund rest, growth, or joy? Or did it just silence anxiety? Then flip the script. Instead of asking, "Can I afford this?" ask, "Does this purchase move me toward the life I want?" A $6 coffee isn't bad if it's your sacred morning ritual with your journal. But a $200 coat you never wear because it felt like success is a hollow trophy. Wealth isn't about what you own, it's about what your money enables. But this clarity forces a final reckoning. How long does this transformation actually take? How long it really takes to stop being broke, and what to expect. If you started today, really started, How long until you stop feeling like you're one missed paycheck from disaster? Here's the truth they don't put in Instagram captions. Transformation isn't linear. It's cyclical, messy, human. Enter the US Coast Guard's 4-stage survival response, originally used to train sailors in shipwreck scenarios, but eerily precise for financial recovery. Denial. It's not that bad, I'll figure it out. Reaction. Oh God, I'm 4-0 in credit card debt. What do I do? Deliberation. Okay, let's build a system that actually works. Action. I've got rules, buffers, and a plan, and I trust them. Most people think change happens in weeks, but real financial rewiring takes 9 to 12 months. Not because you're slow, but because your brain, habits, and environment need time to sink. Months 1-3 are setting up systems, auto transfers, spending rules, maybe a tiny emergency fund. You'll feel fragile. One surprise expense will knock you sideways. That's normal. You're not failing, you're stress testing your hull. Months 4-6, momentum kicks in. You've saved $500 without thinking. You skip a group expense without guilt. But now comes the friction. Friends question your weird habits. Old temptations return stronger. This is where most quit, not from lack of will, but from loneliness. Months 7-12, integration begins. Scarcity thinking fades. You stop counting every dollar and start asking, what kind of life does this money enable? You're not just out of the hole, you're building something on solid ground. And here's the kicker. You won't notice you've arrived until someone else points it out. Maybe it's when your cousin asks how you stay so calm about rent, or when you realize you haven't felt that 3A meme bank balance panic in months. Because stopping being broke isn't about hitting a number. It's about becoming someone who doesn't live in fear anymore. And that starts the moment you decide to stop treating yourself like an afterthought and start treating your future self like someone worth protecting.